there are three pillars to building wealth. And here to talk with me about that is CJ Miller of Sensible Money. CJ, welcome.
Hi, Bob.
So just three things people need to do to build their wealth. What are they?
That's absolutely right. Everybody tends to kind of look at the tip of the iceberg and look at all these millionaires and billionaires and say, wow, they got lucky, or, they got the timing right. But for the average person, you've got to start somewhere, or else you'll never get on the track to get that much money, or really any at all. And so I always think of the first pillar as learning the money management basics. And this is different than what you learn in school about investing, or what you read online about getting rich quick. It's more about how you actually manage your day-to-day money. And I think the first step to that is understanding your spending limits. A lot of people, when they leave college or start their first job, end up with disposable income for the first time in their lives. And it's really easy to overspend and not track your budget. So I always think the first step is understanding how far your money will go. And once you do that, you can really start saving, because then you have an understanding of what you want to spend money on. And so that's the second step, is realizing that what you save is far more important than what you make. Because if you keep making more money as you progress in your career, then you might spend more money and upgrade your lifestyle instead of putting money away. And then you're never building wealth at all, because you're spending it all.
And then another element of learning money management basics is the need to establish goals, right? Both short-term and long-term.
Yeah. And this can be hard to do until you have experienced having some money and you have flexibility and different choices. But it's hard to know if you're on track if you don't set a goal. So, I recommend people start with an emergency fund if they don't already have one. You take 10% or 20% of your income and you put it in a savings account. And that way, when unexpected expenses come up, you're protected. But also, if you're spending more than you thought you were, then you'll see it, because you're not hitting your savings goals on a day-to-day basis. But how do you really know if you're successful in building wealth if you don't even have a number in mind of where you want to get to, either short-term or long-term?
Mm-hmm. So the second pillar of building wealth is something that I love chatting about, especially for young folks who have just graduated college and entered the workforce. And what they fail to realize is how much human capital they have.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the second pillar, is maximizing your human capital. And, if I was to take all of your assets at the age of 22 when you have a bachelor's degree, or even 26 or 27 if you have a master's degree, and I laid it out on a balance sheet, your biggest asset would be called human capital, your ability to earn money over time using your professional skills. And even if you don't have a college degree, that's still your biggest asset. You can go get a trade, or make money with your hands, or do something different on an alternative career path. But still, your ability to earn money is what's most important. And so you really want to maximize that when you're young, because if you do, it's going to be a lot easier to build wealth and you'll make a lot more money over your lifetime. And I tell people the first step on that is finding something you love to do. And it doesn't have to be a high income career, because the reality is if you hate doing it, you won't last and you won't get to the highest level of your profession. But even if you love something that doesn't make a lot of money at first, if you love to do it, you're more likely to see your income go up, because you're really motivated to do well and get better every day. Now, the second component that you really need to understand, especially after you've been settled in your career for a little while, is that you need to understand how you're paid, both in salary and cash income, but also in soft dollar benefits. It's said that millennials switch jobs all the time, and that's partially true. But I do think that some younger people get a little rash, and they look at their salary and they get an offer for 10% more in cash, and they jump ship without really realizing what they're missing. But the reality is, if you get, for instance, a really great health insurance plan, or you get a lot of paid time off, all of those soft dollar benefits have value that you might not see, on your bottom line in your bank account, but do save you money over your lifetime. And so you really have to be able to evaluate those things. And even one step further, looking at, upward mobility. You may take a job that's paying you less, but has the potential to move up farther and faster up the corporate ladder. And that's a risk that you take doing that job, but it could pay off in dividends down the road. And that's something you need to find some way to monetize before you make big career decisions.
Mm. And another element of maximizing your human capital is something that I think is a great lesson for all young people, and that's the notion of thinking big.
Yeah. And this one's hard to quantify. I guess it's a little more motivational, but from a qualitative standpoint, you have to think big and you can never really settle. And what I mean by that is that it's easy to get comfortable, especially once you get that first job and you're paying your rent and you're putting some money away. It's easy to go, well, I could do this forever. But the reality is when you're young, you still have nothing to lose, really. You could take 3 years off and, travel. I'm not saying that's the right move to build wealth, but, if you're not happy at your job, you could go start a company or take risks and then go right back into the corporate world 3 years later, and you haven't lost that much time. But when you're in your late 30s and you have a family potentially, or you have a big liability that you have to pay for, you don't get to take those risks. So it's really important that you don't settle on a particular career unless you have a lot of clarity that what you're doing is what you want to be doing and what you're going to want to be doing for the next, 10 or 20 years of your life. So never settle on a job you're not crazy about, because there's always something better out there if you look for it and take the risk.
Right.
And that does lead me to the third pillar. Go ahead, Bob.
No. Go ahead.
I was going to say that does lead me to the third pillar of building wealth, and that is taking calculated risks. In principle, I think a lot of people think that building wealth is this systemic thing that you can do easily. And if you have good habits, that will happen over time. But to build a lot of wealth, you do have to be willing to take certain risks, because it's not guaranteed. Putting money in a savings account that's earning, 0.2% less now over your life isn't going to build that much wealth. It's just saving money that you made that you didn't spend, which is a good start. But to really build wealth, you want to take calculated risks, both with your career and also with the money that you save. And so I think that starts by investing it in the stock market and real estate. Both of those are risky assets, but if you invest in them prudently and over time, you can make money on the money that you saved, and compound interest is no joke.
And what about becoming an entrepreneur? That's certainly a calculated risk, but is it something that folks should consider?
I think so, if you have the right personality. I mean, what you have to realize is that whereas in the stock market, if you diversify and invest over time, it's not like playing, it's not like gambling at a casino. Historically, you have made money over time in the stock market, and that appears to likely to be continuing to happen over 30 to 40-year periods. Entrepreneurship is kind of the opposite. Most entrepreneurs fail. And a lot of them that you hear, really successful, ultra wealthy entrepreneurs, failed 5, 6, 7 times before they got it right. And so that being said, it's still the best way to build wealth in this country. If you can build a successful business and bet on yourself and your own skills, and you have the leadership ability to do it, there's no faster and more efficient way to build wealth if you do it correctly.
So taking calculated risks is one way to build wealth, but avoiding get-rich-quick schemes is something that people should abide by as well.
Yeah, well, especially if you look at the news lately with GameStop stock and Bitcoin, and you hear about your neighbor who bought, $1,000 of Bitcoin in 2009, and now they're worth $5 million or something. Those stories become appealing, and that is really when people start thinking about how to build wealth, because they realize they feel like they're behind the curve. But you really want to get out of the keeping up with the Joneses mentality. And when you start reading about things that, can get you rich overnight, you have to realize that that's not actually a calculated risk. That's a speculative risk. And so you're betting on something irrational to continue. And you don't want to be on the wrong end of that risk with your money. And it can actually have the opposite effect of building wealth. And I think we've seen that with GameStop stock and some of the cryptocurrencies that people weren't willing to invest in for a long period of time, and had to take their money out, at a pretty big loss. So, if it sounds too easy when it comes to building wealth, it probably is. And that's a really important lesson to keep in mind when you're thinking about taking risks.
Yeah. Well, CJ, it's always a pleasure chatting with you about this topic. I know it helps a good many young adults who are perhaps fresh out of college and working in their first or second job out of college. So it's greatly appreciated.
You're very welcome.